Thank you very much, Brian, for those words of introduction, and I think I would echo that it is amazing how many people Anne and Brian have managed to draw together in this room today to discuss, and I hope, as Brian says, in an objective way as possible, what we know and what we don't know about bovine TB. Brian's asked me to say a few words by way of introduction, and he very kindly over-egged my knowledge of bovine TB, but as you will all know, I did become involved in it. As it happens, this is the 20th anniversary this year of the publication of the report. Let me just get this up here, if that can work. Of the report that, is it too bright here? Do we need to dim the lights a little? Can people see? Dim the lights. Okay, I'm going to work on this. There's something called lights, 50%. Is that better? 20%. How about that? Now you can see. Great. So I can read. So this was the report, and I had the privilege of chairing a wonderful group of experts, some of whom are here in the room today. I can see Christl and Rosie in the front row. But it was an effort, a team effort, hugely supported by an excellent secretariat provided by what was then MAF. And I was asked by Douglas Hogg in 1996, who was then Minister MAF, to look into the question of bovine TB in badgers. There had been two previous inquiries, the Zuckerman report in the early 80s, or maybe a bit earlier than that, and then the Dunnett report in the mid-80s. But still, no one had come to a clear view about what the relationship between badgers and bovine TB was. So we looked at all the evidence, we took a huge number of witness statements, we visited farms, etc., and this is what we're most known for having said. And this is a direct quote from the executive summary. So we said, to summarize it, you can read it, but there is a compelling case that badgers can transmit TB to cattle, but what we don't know is what contribution badgers make to the problem, and therefore we don't know whether killing badgers is going to be an effective control strategy. And we went on to recommend what became known as the randomized badger culling trial, which MAF did indeed set up, as we all know, and although it was delayed a bit by foot and mouth disease, it was fully implemented and fully analysed by the independent expert group chaired by Professor John Bourne, who's very sad that he can't join us today because he is suffering from flu. So that's what we were known for, was the randomised badger culling trial. But echoing what Brian said in his wise words of introduction, we also said that it is a complex problem, there's going to be no single solution, and a combination of approaches will be required on different timescales. And we made a whole raft of recommendations, depending on how you count them, but I've summarized it as 17 key recommendations, which covered collecting more data, proper surveillance, for example, of road kills to find out what proportion of the badger population carries TB, using molecular techniques to understand the distribution of different genotypes of the bacterium in cattle and in badgers, use of mathematical modeling to understand the epidemiology, implementation of better husbandry practice based on evidence, improving the diagnostic tests, developing a better vaccine, and a vaccine that could be used to distinguish between the vaccinated and the infected animal, and all that underpinned by research. So one question that is in my mind, having gone back to my 1997 report, is how much more do we know today in these key areas? And I hope that the meeting today will help us to answer those questions. I just wanted to make another couple of points, and I don't want to get aggressive about this, but I did read with great surprise and relief when the Secretary of State for DEFRA said in the Oxford Farming Conference in January that the problem had actually been solved, that England was going to go for TB-free status. And I was so surprised at that, that luckily, Nigel is somewhere in the audience, I had the opportunity to ask the Chief Vet, when he appeared in front of the Energy and Environment Select Committee in the Lords, what he felt about this. And this is what Nigel said: we hope to gain EU recognition for a good half, but not the greatest part of the cattle population is close to achieving regional free status. Rather different from what the Secretary of State said. So I said, do you mean that's the part of England where there's not much dairy? So where the cattle aren't. Nigel says exactly. So I don't want to make a political point, and I'm not making a political point, other than to say we're here today to stay away from the politics, to talk about the science and the evidence. And the politicians may be badly briefed, they may be overinterpret their brief, but that's not our job today. And we may have megaphone diplomacy out there on the streets when we want to engage on the radio and other media with a political view, but that's not our job today. So how much has our understanding advanced? Have we got a better diagnostic test? Do we understand more about vaccination? Do we know, which we didn't know in 1997, exactly what the routes of transmission are? How do the badgers and the cattle come into contact? Is the disease going from cattle to badgers or badgers to cattle? Do we know more about that? Do we understand why some farms, even in the high-risk areas in the southwest, virtually never get TB? And I know from the DEFRA statistics it tends to be small farms that are more isolated rather than the large dairy farms. Do we understand whether or not killing badgers is an effective control strategy? And I think there are different views about that still today, even after that massive investment by the government in the randomised badger culling trial. So I'm really looking forward to learning today, and whether any of these questions will be answered or other questions will be answered remains open, but I very much hope some of them will. And that's really all I want to say by way of introduction. But welcome everybody, and I'm really looking forward to listening to the talks today. Thank you.